What if Trafalgar Law was evil? Because that was the original plan. I mean, I say plan. In reality, everything was pretty vague. The stories of all of the supernovas were originally painted with a distinct Gaussian blur applied, but Law was one of the very few characters who had a sense of clarity. Trafalgar Law was introduced as an undeniably sinister, scheming figure, always smiling at you as if he was mentally picturing the events that would inevitably lead to your death. Law was presented as something of a puppet master, which shouldn't be surprising given his affiliation to Doflamingo. But early Law's character traits included a distinct pleasure in sowing chaos and watching others fight, such as when he was enjoying the conflict between Mad Monk Rouge and Massacre Soldier Killer. That fight was then broken up by Drake, to which Law said, "Too bad, things were just getting good. Drake, how many people have you killed?" Which isn't exactly the dialogue of your typical protagonist. And I honestly can't picture post-time skip Law saying those words. With a Jolly Roger directly referencing Doflamingo, and introduced as the quote, surgeon of death, it was a natural conclusion to assume that Law may not be the goodest of boys. And there's actually evidence that Eiichiro Oda may have intended for Law to be an antagonist all the way up to the Punk Hazard arc. In this sketch, Sanji is being a rather clever cook, catching on to Law's true motives, to which Law replies, "You're sharp, aren't you?" with a very classic antagonistic smirk. And as we know, Law's character took a sharp protagonistic turn. As story chef, Eiichiro Oda served us a Law soup complete with morals, heroics, a tragic yet spicy mentor, and the most important ingredient was not something Oda added, but something he took away. When Law became a solid protagonist, he pretty much just stopped smiling. And I guess that makes sense because he's not an arrogant agent of chaos anymore. He's taking things very seriously, and serious people do not smile. And the really fun thing is that to justify this, Oda had to more or less create a good version of Doflamingo to serve as Law's mentor instead. Because that Doflamingo, he's a bit of a bad dude. So instead, Law was taught by his brother, Joe Flamingo. He's the good one. Later, of course, renamed Rocinante. But I can't help but wonder what may have been if we'd kept to the original plan. And to make this happen is actually a shockingly simple process. We just need to remove one ingredient from Oda's story soup, and that would be Rocinante. If we take him out of the picture, then Law is left with no one but Doflamingo as a mentor, and Rocinante's worst fears will be brought to life. You can't turn into a monster like my brother. Get away from here, Law. But with no Rocinante, there will be no Law getaway. So how do things play out? Well, Law already has one of the more tragic backstories in the series, intentionally poisoned by his kingdom and the world government and ruthlessly exterminated, surviving only by shielding himself within the corpses of his former kingdom dwellers. It really is a solid supervillain backstory, and this experience eventually led Law to join the Don Quixote Pirates. And his reason for joining was, and I quote, "I just came to join the family so I could kill everyone and everything." And Doflamingo immediately saw potential there, because of course he did. He is also a raving, murdering lunatic. But also because Doflamingo was described by Rocinante as born with an innately evil nature that knows no bounds. So child Law and adult Doflamingo actually complement each other quite well here. This is now the mentor that Law has, and so he will never be taught the true value of life and never have anyone who truly cares for him, save for maybe Baby Five and Buffalo. And so things play out quite similarly. Law will still eat the Opi Opi no Mi because it was Doflamingo who found the fruit, not Rocinante. His family will acquire it either directly themselves or through Virgo amongst the Marines on Minion Island. However it happens doesn't matter because it will be given to Law as part of the Eternal Youth plan. And just on this, Doflamingo made his plan pretty clear to Rocinante in their final conversation. Well, if he's already eaten the Opi Opi no Mi, I'll need to raise him so that he knows to die for my sake. And that's exactly what he'll try to do. Law will probably have quite a few years up his sleeves for Doflamingo to groom this belief. However, the problem is that this is incompatible with Law's goal, which, as I will remind you, is killing everyone and everything. In fact, thinking about it, granting Doflamingo's eternal life is, dare I say, counterproductive to killing. So Law will eventually either have to confront Doflamingo or escape from the crew. And something I suppose we should note about this timeline is that Law will never meet the Heart Pirates, because he found them as a child after escaping Minion Island. But now Law has remained a Don Quixote pirate well into his teenage years. However, he can still form a crew. It's very plausible that Law could recruit his childhood friends Baby Five and Buffalo, mostly because Baby Five will do quite literally anything you ask, so long as you make it clear that you need her. And Buffalo is easily bribed with assorted treats like ice cream, but also because the three of them did have a connection. Baby Five and Buffalo were both legitimately worried about Law. And funnily enough, in the canon timeline, Law and Baby Five did go on to become allies because she's now part of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet. So Baby Five's betrayal of Doflamingo at any point is very plausible because it did actually happen. So the Heart Pirates form, except you know what? They're not the Heart Pirates because that was a reference to Rocinante. And if anything, Law right now is the opposite of Rocinante's ideals here. So what is the opposite of Heart? If it were a suit of cards, I'd say maybe maybe Spade, but we've already got the Spade Pirates, so instead I think we'll go with the Kill Murder Pirate Squad starring Trafalgar Law. Law shall retain his brutal goal of killing everyone and everything, and of course still earn his terrifying epithet as the Surgeon of Death. But his main milestone goal is to kill Doflamingo, which eventually brings us to Sabody, which goes down exactly as it does in the series. Because even in the canon events, Law is portrayed as evil, except instead of a bear and a penguin, Law will have a buffalo and a baby in his crew. But legitimately, nothing else needs to change about Sabody. However, when it comes to Marineford, that is where we see a major global shift. Law watches from afar with the rest of the supernova, very in character, probably relishing in the bloodshed, like a voyeur in the corner of some sort of fictional pirate orgy. The One Piece is real, etc. However, in this timeline, Law will never join the fight, aka he will not go out of his way to save Luffy. The reason is because it was Rocinante who taught Law the true value of the D, and without Rocinante, it's just another initial. Law doesn't recognize it as anything particularly special or fatesome, so he's not going to go out of his way to save Luffy. And this means that Luffy will almost certainly die. There is an argument to be made that Shanks would have stopped Luffy being killed on the battlefield by, say, Kizaru, but the bigger problem is Luffy's existing injuries. It took a doctor of both Law's skill and Law's specific magical fruit powers to ensure that Luffy would survive. And even then, Law himself said there was no guarantee that Luffy would ever recover. So I do think that without Law's intervention, our future Pirate King becomes our current pirate corpse. Also, because I don't think I'll ever have a chance to talk about this in another video, I just want to linger on this panel of Law meeting Ivankov, because I always misread Ivankov's dialogue as, "By the way, who are you? Straw Hat's boyfriend?" And honestly, I don't think that would be out of character for Ivankov. But instead of saving Luffy, we are going to plow on with Law's plan, which he sums up as, "Now just shut your mouths and follow me. I'll take my rightful place when the time comes." He was so much more villainous than I think most of us remember. So much so that even in this hypothetical evil Law scenario, all I need to do to make him evil is cut and paste his existing dialogue. But by this time, the Kill Murder Pirate Squad will have recruited many new members, all equally as invested in doing exactly what it says on the box, and this will culminate in the Rocky Port incident, said to be masterminded by our very own Surgeon of Death. Law obtains 100 hearts from 100 non-consenting pirates. He then offers those to the world government and becomes a warlord of the sea. And this is where we encounter a very interesting twist. From here, Law will still go to Punk Hazard with the intention of being a general prick. However, we run into a newly created and very Monet-shaped problem. So Punk Hazard is always a bit confusing in the series because the timelines of when things and what things happen can be tricky to put together. But Monet is a member of the Don Quixote family. However, in the series, Law didn't know this because she joined shortly after Law left. However, in this timeline, Law didn't leave, and so he is aware of Monet's affiliation, which means he knows he cannot trust her or stay on Punk Hazard, because his position will be immediately reported to Doflamingo, and then general bad things will occur. So to realize his plan, Law is going to need some more head-on firepower. And given that he was already thinking of making an alliance in the actual series, that probably means that he's going to seek out an alliance. The natural go-to at the time would be Eustace Kid. He is, of course, the most notorious member of the worst generation still alive. However, he's already planning an alliance of his own to take down Shanks, having invited Basil Hawkins and Scratchman Apu. And that's not ideal, because what Law needs is for this alliance to focus on Kaido. If they target Shanks, Doflamingo, meaningless. He won't be touched. However, I can't say that his other options are great. At this point, Diaz Drake has already aligned himself with Kaido, and Capone Gang Beige has pledged his services to Big Mom, so they're both out. Luffy's dead, so he's out. Zoro's irrelevant, probably doing something somewhere, doesn't matter, he's out. Jewelry Bonnie gives absolutely zero craps about Law's Flamingo cause, and that really does leave us with just Mad Monk Rouge, who Law probably won't be able to find because he's spending his time hiding out in the sky. So Law really doesn't have many great options here. He can either try to take Punk Hazard, and as a result, the Don Quixote pirates down on his own, which will end badly, or he can try to weasel his way into the Kid Alliance and hope for the best. But look, I'm gonna be blunt here. Either way, it has the same outcome. Let's say he joins the Kid Alliance. Great. That alliance is abruptly broken by the arrival of Kaido from the sky, who I prefer to call Skydo. But Skydo will land on the ground and become Kaido once more, and then even with Law to help defend, this alliance is being easily defeated again. And because Kaido is an ally of Doflamingo, inevitably Law will find himself captured and taken to Dressrosa. For a very dark take on the Dressrosa rock, because from here one of two things can happen. Either Law acquiesces and performs the surgery on Doflamingo, thus killing Law, or Doflamingo can choose to recover the Opi Opi no Mi and thus also killing Law. Either way, Law dies, but his legacy will live on in the form of some very unfortunate consequences. In the most immediate outcome, all of the toys on Dressrosa will probably remain slaves, slaves, Sabo won't win the Mera no Mi in the Corridor Coliseum, and Doflamingo and Caesar are never stopped. They continue making weapons for Kaido until he's ready to launch his global campaign. On Wano, the new Onigashima project will be completed, resulting in the murder or enslavement of all remaining citizens on Wano. I want to say that Kaido will eventually realize that he has Pluton, but he hasn't found it in 20 years, so I have no reason to suspect that he ever will. But once ready, Kaido will unleash the biggest war this world has ever seen, immediately forcing the other three emperors into conflict. Some like Blackbeard out of opportunity to capitalize on chaos, or some like Shanks out of his long-standing obligation to stop wars. And of course, some like Big Mom, who shares Kaido's goals of finding the One Piece and becoming the Pirate King. And eventually, the two of them will likely form an alliance just as they did in the series. And in the face of that, Shanks alone will not be enough to stop them. He would either need to form an alliance with the Marines, or a most unlikely alliance with Blackbeard to bring the power dynamic back to parity. Should neither of those things happen, I think that Kaido and Big Mom succeed. The race for Pirate King is essentially narrowed down to the two of them, and the world would be plunged into an even darker era than it currently exists in. And all of this will be thanks to the selfish desires of one very evil Trafalgar Law, who does actually kind of achieve his dream beyond the grave, by the way, because a lot of the individual components that make up the concepts of, quote, everyone and everything will indeed die.